Hey garden friends, welcome on back to Flower Patch. As promised, today we're going to pot up some rose canes cuttings that I have propagated in my little aquaponics propagation, and the ones I've done in the terracotta pot with the two pots together. I'll share the videos where I showed how I do those, and then I'm going to share with you how I saved a rose that was dying. Now this only works with own root roses, and that's why I buy primarily own root roses. I will only buy a grafted rose if I can only find it that way and it's one I particularly want, but I always go for the majority of the time with own root roses. So let's get going. All right, I'm going to go through these. I know one of them is fully rooted, or I shouldn't say fully, has roots, and I just don't know where it is. I'll pull these out and look at them. This is an Eden rose that doesn't even have any pre-roots. So now this one has, I knew it was on this end, but I've got this way overfilled. Now you see that? Can you see that? Let me see if I can. See that little root there? That's just getting started. So I'll let that continue. And then let me see this one here. Aha, look at that. You see that root? That's the one we are going to pot up right now. So I'm going to set it back in there. I should have got myself a little glass of water to put that in while I do this. Okay, so that is the one that's fully rooted, and I have a bunch of others in here that are, I gotta be careful with that, just getting going. That's really thick on that. And oh, this one has roots too. Look at that. So that one's looking a little slimy, but look at, see the little nubs on it? Hopefully I'm holding it where you can see the little nubs. Those are pre-roots, and that is a little root. And this one is an Eden. The ones that aren't marked are Eden. So, but you see how this is like at a juncture? I have noticed that the ones that you take at a juncture are faster in rooting. I had read that somewhere. I couldn't tell if, when I do it in soil, if that really was accurate, but it has proven true. I'm making sure that's down in the water because some of them pop up. No, that's not going to work. Just give me a moment so I can get this back in here carefully. Now I will go through here and see if any others have a lot of roots like the one I did, but I won't drag you through that. So I'll just do that. Some of these, because they have a tendency to pop up, they're looking a little sorry. So I need to do something a little bit different than this, or not try to fit so many in there. But okay, let's go pot this one up that has roots. Alrighty, so I have my bulk. This is turkey compost from a local organic turkey farm. Standing back away so I don't breathe that in. And then I'm going to add a little bit of perlite. I don't really measure. I just make sure there's enough there to keep the soil looser. And then, because I have it, I add some green sand. Let me find it. It's over here. Now I bought this because it was an ingredient when you do soil blocking. I never did really get into the soil blocking much, so I have it left over. Now some people will have you put worm castings in here when you're making your own soil, saying it gives it that extra boost of nutrition, etc. Well, I was reading that a lot of the bulk worm castings you can buy online or at a garden center, they're pasteurized. So really it has neutralized during the pasteurization process any really good microbes or nutrients that it would normally carry. So all the benefits of worm castings are kind of null and void. Therefore, it's not worth the money. So you can do your own research on it, but that's just a little bit of what I found in doing my research on it. So that's one of those things that it became popular because people had read that worm castings are so good, so they decided to market them. And then what they had to do to make it where they could do it and not pass on, I guess, pathogens, etc., they have to pasteurize it. And there kind of goes against the whole reason you want worm castings. So I no longer purchase them. I do have a worm box. I do need, or worm, it's called the worm can. I do need to set it back up and then use that, because the fresh worm castings really are beneficial. So if you can make your own vermicomposting setup, there's lots of DIYs online, as well as I will link to the one I have. All right, so I got me some. Yes, I have such great language skills. I have some perlite mixed in here. There's some sticks, little sticks or whatever, because this is compost. I'm not worried about it. If you want to screen this, go right ahead. I don't bother. I am the lazy gardener. Let me grab my glove. I dropped one down here. So I'm going to put my gloves on to do this because I have my rings on and I don't want to get them all dirty. So I have some clean small pots. And I'm just going to put in some of my DIY potting soil. You saw how easy it was. I don't go through all the trouble of all the different things. Coconut coir, I have kind of steered away from it. I have it in my DIY potting soil recipe online. But I have found, because they're taking all this coconut coir from the coconut groves to sell, it is now depleting. That's what they used there to fertilize. You know, they just leave them on the ground, etc. And it fed those trees. Well, now that they're harvesting it to sell, they're having to use synthetic fertilizers there. And it's kind of going against what you're trying to do with helping the environment. So I stopped buying the coconut coir. Yeah. And a lot of times, if you're not careful, you can get some that's still full of salt water because they rinse it through, and you can cause problems in your potting soil with that. So there's so many variables of why I've given up using coconut coir. Now, it's supposed to be some that helps with water retention in here. I have not had any issues with using just the compost, a little bit of perlite to keep it good draining, well draining. You could also use, I have horticultural sand. You could also use that to help with the drainage. I like to use it like as a top layer for things. But anyway, so I've got this probably a third full. Here is my nicely rooted cutting. I'm just sticking it in here, setting it on top of the soil, and then I fill it up. And that is basically it. Now you notice I don't pre-moisten the soil. I don't pre-moisten the soil for seedlings. You see a lot of times people will pre-moisten their seed starting mix and then try to put it in the trays. That's a pain in the patoot, and it's unnecessary. I do that. Let me see it. Let me get this tray. And I stick it in a container that has a bottom. Let me see. Can you see down here? Probably not. Let me point you down just a wee bit. So you see here, this has a bottom. Now in here, you see this is dark. I'm using a growth stimulant, and it's called Organic REV, and I have found that it really is a good thing to add because it really does help the roots get going, and that's what you want. You want good roots. If you have good roots, you have good plants. So I want to encourage more root, and I will just keep adding this. First I'll add this. I'll let it soak it back up because it's running through, and then I'll go ahead and water some more until it will no longer absorb water. That means that the soil here has absorbed all it can and it will be moist. And after it's done that, I will put it out in the sunshine, because right now we're still having warm temperatures without it being too hot, and it'll be perfect for it to help it to get going. So that is my potting up of that rose cutting. Now, if you have been around here much, you have known or heard about this propagation method that I have tried. Okay, let me tilt you back up. I'm cutting my head off just a wee bit. All right. So this is filled with the horticultural sand. This is a terracotta pot. with another terracotta pot in the center that has a cork in the hole. The hole is plugged. I keep this filled with water, the inner one. It leaches like an Oya pot would. Terracotta, I'm looking up there because I have one up there. And the water evaporating from here also keeps moisture around the plants, the cuttings. These I started last February, and I haven't got them potted up yet. So I wanted to get at least another one done. I've done one, but you see how well these have leafed out. Now, I will say I did lose a couple of the cuttings here, but this has been a very good method for me for propagation of the rose cuttings. So this keeps the sand moist. The humidity means I don't have to put a cover on it. You could if you wanted to. And yeah, this has just been a great way to propagate roses too, rose cuttings. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to fill up a pot here. I'm going to go ahead and make up some more of the Rev water to soak it in for a little bit. Soak the rose cutting that I dig up. I'm just going to mix my potion back here. And I am going to dig up one of these. Let me see, which one is this? These are some very old roses. This is white pearl in a red dragon's mouth. I will see if I can find a picture of one for you, but you could probably look that up. White pearl in a red dragon's mouth. So I can feel that cutting is way down there. I don't want to hurt the roots, like if it's stuck to the bottom. So I'm just going to gently maneuver it up. Maneuver it up. Seems like I had some soil in here too, mixed with the sand, potting soil. Oh, I think it's gone underneath the other pot. They've been in here too long, I confess that. So it might have roots way traveling. I see some stuck to the side of this pot. You hear that plane overhead? That's a fire spotter. That's a little nerve-wracking when you hear that. Oh wow, this one has a lot of nice roots. But look at that. Look at that. So I am going to put this down in here and let it soak. So I found this method. If you don't want to do the aquaponic solution, this one worked very well for me. Now I tried it in midwinter. It didn't do well in midwinter. But come spring, well I shouldn't say that because in February is when I stuck these. But I was talking January or earlier. So these, when I got them, I put them in this and I had them in the small bespoke greenhouse and left them in there. So they were there from February on through till now, which is now almost October 1st. So yeah, so I will go ahead, I will pot those up in a little bit, but I wanted to get this one going. And yeah, I'm just amazed with those roots. Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful, wonderful. I'm just sitting it in here. See this? Setting it in there. Hopefully you can see. It might be focusing on my face. It depends on my settings on my camera. I didn't check. Okay, so go ahead and put these in here. And I'll get another pot bottom saucer to catch the water. Here's one. I was collecting castor beans and take them out of their little thing. Yes, I have a beautiful castor bean plant that I love. And yes, I know castor beans are poisonous, but I don't eat them or crush them or anything. I just grow them because they make a beautiful, big, beautiful plant that looks tropical. I love tropical looking plants. So I'm just going to pour this in until it filters through again. Then I'll let it set in the residue, what comes through, to soak it back up. And that way I know the soil is good and moist. Alrighty. All is good with that. So that, my friends, is how I pot up propagated rose cuttings. And this is the last day of September. We are supposed to have warm weather. I mentioned that before, so I'm going to put them out in the garden. Now, a lot of people ask me, what do you do with them after you pot them up? Do you let them overwinter outside? I, many times, will overwinter them either in here, in this greenhouse, which is not heated, or in my bespoke greenhouse. Sometimes I have them out in the garden. We are zone 8B. We get a lot of snow, we get some heavy freezes, but not as bad, and our temperatures don't get as low as in with people in other regions. So you could also, if you're in a colder region, bury these pots in the ground. You could do it several ways. You could put them in a larger container that you're going to bury in the ground. I could put 3 or 4 of them in, cover them up, but when you go to dig them up, it should be really easy to just pull the pots out and then pot them up. That is one way. You could maybe put them in a garage that doesn't get below freezing inside in a bright window. They need bright light. So I have not really brought them inside like that. Many times my greenhouse, my little greenhouse, or the other little greenhouse, which is the DIY one, we built it ourselves, is enough to protect them just fine. So that's your options. You could also put them up against the house. Put them in a larger, because these are kind of small. They would freeze through easy. You could put them in a larger container, insulate it. Some people use bubble wrap, burlap, and put them up against the house, and the warmth from the house should be enough to keep them from freezing too hard. And that's how I do it. Now, as far as watering, when they need water, I give it to them. That differs according to your climate. How much rain you get, how hot it is, all of those variables. In the winter, of course, they don't need as much water, but you don't want them to dry out either. So just keep an eye on them. And many times I will use, I don't think I have it out here, a moisture meter. I don't stick my finger down in there because I want the moisture down here. My finger will not go down there. So I will put the moisture meter in. I will link to the one I use, very cheap. And I don't go by, because some of them, they have marks for certain plants. I don't even bother with that. I just see if there's some moisture in it without being too moist. I don't want it wet. I want it moist. And on the dial, or whatever you call it, the meter, it'll tell you wet, moist, or dry. And so I just want moist. Sometimes I want it closer to the dry than I do to the wet, so that they don't rot. That's what you don't want. You don't want them to drown. If it's too wet, that's what happens. They don't have enough oxygen down here for the roots, and they drown. So that's what you don't want. Okay, there we have it. I have potted up my 2 different methods of propagating roses. I have 2 others. I shouldn't say they're not really that different. Well, yeah, they are. The air layering, which has worked usually in the past. This year I got too busy and I didn't keep track of making sure the pod wrapped around the cane for the air layering was moist, so those did not take. But if you pay attention, it will work very well. And you can get a larger rose faster that way. And also I've done the regular propagation where you do it in soil. And these ones are some that I did that way. So these are the regular ones. So, and then I pot them up. Usually I'll put them up in these bigger ones, but these I didn't. And then I wait before I pot these up into larger containers. I will wait until I see roots coming out the bottom. So, and I don't see any. So these have been in here. Usually I like to have them outside. They get the brighter light. The brighter the sunlight, the better, as long as it's not super scorching hot. And yeah, these I need to put out in the garden, and that way they can get more sun right now while it's not that hot, and really get some roots going before winter. Okay, I wanted to share one more thing with you. One more thing. This is a rose. This is called Betty Harkness. I had it out in a barrel in the front garden, entrance garden, and I noticed it was failing or faltering. It just wasn't doing what it should do. So I moved it. I moved it over by Primrose Cottage. It didn't like it there. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was too hot of a time, but anyways, it looked like it died. But I knew I bought it own root. So own root means it is not grafted onto a different rootstock. It is all one plant, the same plant. So I dug it up and I cut it back and I potted it up in here in a container. I placed it in here and I kept watch on it. I gave it a bit of Organic REV. I've told you about this a lot, Organic REV, and that's supposed to be a root stimulant, growth stimulant. And I want to share with you, this is a few weeks later. Look at this. I've got a new rose, or it's sprouting again. I shouldn't say a new rose. It is sprouting up from the root. Now, if this had been a grafted rose, that sprout would not be a Betty Harkness rose. It would be Dr. Huey or something like that. And that's not what I bought or wanted. I wanted Betty Harkness. I bought this after my mom died. My mom's name was Betty. And this was the rose I bought in memorial of her. So, in memory of her. So I'm thrilled that it's coming back from the own root. And they will. I buy own root roses because we can get some really late or very early hard freezes that can kill roses back to the ground. That's happened to me. I have lost 70 roses in the past. They were all David Austin roses. They were grafted. And they wouldn't come back. True. I had a few roses that were own root, vintage roses, and they came back. Even they had been killed back to the ground too. It was really a freak year. Whereas like right now, we're having 80 degrees weather. It was October, I think it was October 10th. Tomorrow will be October 1st, but we had 80 degrees, 80 degrees, 80 degrees, and then overnight it dropped to 10 degrees. The roses were not dormant. They were not ready for any kind of cold weather. It killed them to the ground. And that is how I lost so many roses. From then on, I was determined, especially when the vintage roses that got killed back came back the following spring. Did just beautiful. I still have them. So that told me I needed to invest in own root roses only. And that's what I've done. And that right there, my friends, is why. It could have been spider mites on it. I've had a real issue with spider mites this year. And so I didn't lose my rose. It's coming back. It's going to do beautiful. I'm going to find a prime spot for it so I can really take care of it. And I have my rose. So that being said, I am going to go now and I'm going to finish fishing through my container, see if any other have rooted, my aquaponics container. If any other of the roses have rooted yet, I'll get those potted up and then I'm going to go start spreading seeds, collecting and spreading seeds like I do in fall for a beautiful spring. So come on back for that.